The Baltic state of Latvia used to be part of the Soviet Union, and it's had plenty of experience of dealing with Russia. Now it's a member of Nato and is pushing for more support for Ukraine, including membership of the European Union. I'm Andrew Hopkins, and I've been speaking to the Latvian Deputy Prime Minister and Defence Minister, Artis Pabriks, one-on-one. Artis Pabriks, Deputy Prime Minister and Defence Minister of Latvia, thank you for talking to TRT World. First of all, I wanted to ask you, Latvia has a lot of experience of Russia. It used to be part of the Soviet Union. How do you evaluate what's happening in Ukraine right now, and where is the situation going to head next, do you think?
Thank you for the question. We have been part of Russia and Soviet Union, but not by our own will, but of course experience also matters in such occasions. Where is it heading? I would say that in the short term, Russians will put more and more stress on Ukrainian civilian population, because their first aggression days were not exactly as they planned, mildly speaking, and that means that they will try to punish more and more Ukrainians, and of course they will try also to push with their mass further on into the Ukrainian territory. Probably one of the items is, as we know, capital Kiev, which could be used from the Russian propaganda perspective as a victory if they ever take Kiev, comparable with something like 1945 Berlin, so they could stage some kind of a victory and hide all the disaster of their soldiers, what they experienced during the last 2 weeks of aggression.
But how can it be brought to an end? How can the conflict be stopped?
Well, there is not an easy way, because obviously there have been some unwilling encouragement also from the West in the last decade for Russians to act more aggressively, because our responses to aggression against Georgia in 2008, after annexation of Crimea, after entering Belarus, they have been always weak. We reflected that when we were watching, for instance, this staged Security Council meeting where Medvedev told, look, yes, they will impose some economic sanctions, and then after a while they will crawl and beg again for a good relationship. Now, the solution at this moment in a short term is, first, we have to give maximum support for Ukraine and Ukrainians to defend their homes, their countries, their homeland and their freedom. That's very simple. We have to support them as much as we can. And secondly, there are no too much sanctions which we can put on Russia about this aggression, because country which pretends or tries to tell that they are a European country in 21st century cannot act like this unpunished. So maximum economic sanctions, maximum support for Ukraine, and then we see.
So you say maximum support for Ukraine, but if NATO is to give maximum support to Ukraine, does that mean, in your opinion, a no-fly zone for the country?
No, it doesn't mean, because unfortunately Ukraine is not part of NATO, and we do not want a NATO-Russia war. This is very clear. But by saying this, it doesn't mean giving up against Russian aggression or blinking on front of Russian aggression. No-fly zone actually by itself is a system which would not very much assist at this current situation. It is rather a kind of a media discussion or political discussion, because we know that maximum harm what Russians are now doing to civilian population in Ukraine is by missiles and also by artillery. No-fly zone would ask us to engage in direct fight with Russian planes. It would demand us probably to take out some raiders on the Russian territory, because planes are connected with raiders, but it would not assist very much against artillery and missile attacks on Ukrainian civilians. So I think we rather should continue to strengthen Ukrainian forces, and we should not allow us to be intimidated by these, exclamations which sometimes come from Kremlin side. So if you do this, we are nuclear power, or if you do this, we might strike something back. If Russian leadership has still some sense of seriousness in international affairs. If Russian leadership really wants to be somebody with whom people sit at the table and negotiate something, they cannot simply rattle, a nuclear threat or something else, because Russia is not the only country which possesses nuclear weapons. So they should remember also this.
In terms of maximum support, though, for Ukraine, is it something you can quantify in terms of what kind of weapons or military equipment you would give them, what kind of aid you would give them? Because so far the emphasis from Western countries has been, in terms of military equipment, what they call sort of defensive equipment, so anti-tank missiles, this kind of thing. So I presume you're obviously in favour of that, but are you in favour of going further than that, offering more, maybe you can say destructive weapons or more offensive weapons? How can you quantify it, and what do you think is most appropriate at the moment?
I would say that in my understanding, the definition and the border between defensive and offensive is always worth discussion, because what does it mean, just defensive weapons in current circumstances where Russians made their aggressive act against other country and is basically moving in the territory of Ukraine. So I would assume that anything is defensive which allows Ukrainians to defend their country against this aggression and against those weapons and people and soldiers which are executing this aggression. This is defense. So the question is not what is defensive or offensive weapon. The question is how this weapon is used by whom, because axe alone is not dangerous. The question is who is holding the axe.
The Ukrainian president recently gave an interview, I believe, in which he said that today it's Ukraine and tomorrow it could be one of the Baltic states, could be Latvia, Estonia, Lithuania, that's the subject of Russia's attention or, subject of a conflict. Do you feel the same way? Do you feel that Russia could threaten you in some way? Do you feel secure about this?
You never can feel 100% secure next to the big bully, which is ready to use a military force and indiscriminate killing of civilians like it happens now. So, of course, the trust of in our neighboring country, Russia, at this moment is basically not even zero, but with minus sign. But on the other hand, we in the Baltics are enough confident that we can defend our borders and we feel safe.
I suppose that's the difference then between your position and Ukraine, because you're inside NATO and they aren't, and you would have that immediate response you would hope from your allies within NATO, but the Ukraine can't at the moment.
Ukraine can't, and this is why maybe all people which have been critical before this war, about demands or wishes of other countries which are neighboring Russia to join NATO, should understand that actually it's not about narrative what Kremlin is proposing to international media, that NATO is expanding or somebody is threatening Russia. Nobody is threatening Russia at all, but probably people in Kremlin should ask a question: why every neighboring country is trying to look for safe haven in such organizations as NATO? Because they don't feel safe from Russians. They simply are afraid of Russians. And I can certainly say that if Latvia wouldn't be now a member of EU and NATO, we already would be invaded just like Ukraine is invaded now.
I understand that in Latvia there is a significant Russian population, something like 37% of the population. Are you worried that Vladimir Putin or the Russian authorities in some way will target them to encourage some kind of Russian nationalism within that population? How do you feel about that?
Well, it's a legitimate question, but I have no worries whatsoever. Because first of all, if you are counting Russian immigrant and Russian minority population in Latvia, it depends how you define them, by a language or by belonging, because this is not just one community, and they are mainly immigrants who came in some later time, also in our urban places and cities. But we never had actually interethnic conflicts, even when we have been fighting for our restoration of freedom in 1980s, for instance. And I can speak for hours about this issue because I wrote my PhD on nationalism and ethnic relations. And in current situation, yes, of course, Putin was trying to target, and Russian propaganda and media were trying to influence and target also this part of our population. But we don't see danger in that because they live in European country. They live good. They live much better than in Russia. And even if they have some sympathy for some authoritarian rule or for their ethnic roots or for the greatness of Soviet Union, which disappeared luckily forever, they would never take arms against Latvia. And if there would be some few crazy people who would do that, believe me, we know where they live, we know how they look. So there is no such danger. So we already had this question when Russians invaded Crimea. There is no chance for green men in Latvia.
Your government has said that Ukraine should become a member of the European Union. How do you see this working out? Do you think some kind of special case should be made? Because normally, from past experience, if a country wants to become a member, it's a process that takes quite a few years, even the ones that get in quite quickly. I think like Croatia took something like 7 or 8 years. So what kind of thing are you suggesting? Do you think a special case should be made for Ukraine here?
My personal conviction is that there is a place for special case because Ukrainians are now paying with blood for membership in European Union. And I would be a very strong supporter of a special approach to Ukraine because when we will end this evil war and Russian aggression against Ukraine, we as Europeans and we as international society, in fact, not just Europeans, United States, Canada, Japan, just anybody, we should recreate and restore in Ukraine every house, every road. We should assist this nation. And at the same time, they should be put on a quick and parallel path to join European Union. So my wish would be, and my support as a politician would be, and I believe that many Latvians now would support this, that after the war, should take maybe 5 years, because of course Ukraine must change. It must be restored. The legislation should be improved. There's a lot of work. We know all this from our own membership time, but we have to do this. If they might not become a NATO country, but they must become an EU country now.
Deputy Prime Minister, thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.